inflatable as a membrane. And we weren't sure even you could put one up in which people would consent to stay more than a half an hour unless they were playing tennis. And my interest is primarily the physical fact that people would consent to be encapsulated in this manner. Now, as far as these other benefits that you're seeking, which are societal and are human and so forth, I regard that as velvet. That was my purpose, to find out, really, if people felt better. My purpose was to find out if it was technically and practicably possible to cover people this way. And the answer so far is yes. And furthermore, you get all these other benefits in feelings and emotion, and that's all the good as far as I'm concerned, because education's been so cold. And if this warms it up a little bit, you're on the side of the angels, as far as I'm concerned. This is my private opinion, not my corporate opinion, which was, will the thing stand up or blow away? Can you heat it or can't you heat it? Will it collapse or won't it collapse? Will it be condemned by somebody or won't it be condemned? Is it legal, isn't it legal? This is kind of had to be my corporate concern, my private concern as a citizen. I would ask you privately, is it really going to warm up the place? Because if it isn't, you've done something good for education.
By the time they've got it all apart, they know how it works.
But can they put it back together?
If they watch it as they take it apart.
I'm sort of like amazed in the kind of almost anarchistic sense that everything really does get done. Like the fact that somehow or another it's just made so that certain people, they know about sanding, and certain other people know about fiberglassing, and certain other people know about engines, and just out of a totally random group.
To some extent, that's because no one has ever done it before, and if there was no one there that could convert this heater unit, we would buy another heater unit if we could find the money someplace. If there's no one there that knew how to fiberglass it, we probably would have wound up painting the capsule instead. Just that fiberglassing is a little more long-lasting, probably cheaper in the end.
We've been told, well, there's going to be a prototype and then there's going to be a large one, but the prototype hasn't gone up yet, and the site's been there and the foundation's laid, but I don't know, the plastic was the wrong kind or something, and it just hasn't gone up. Nothing really solid has happened. It's been mostly talk, and I really hope it does come off. But after so long, you get kind of cynical about whether the people doing it are really able and planning on carrying it through.
This will alert the other departments. It's an 8-part permit. Will alert the electrical, plumbing, and fire prevention and assessment that's going up, and you'll have automatic inspections until it's completed. And at that time, we'll give you a use and occupancy permit to allow you to use the building, and that indicates that it's met all the specifications of the code and it's perfectly safe for the health and welfare and safety of the citizens of Howard County and the students of Antioch College.
Defined in the context of the college and its needs. And based on the situation 2 weeks ago, when we had almost $9,000 of unpaid student rent, massive student complaints about living in Columbia, it seems to me that it's silly to project a large investment into a physical plant in a locale that students can't stand because of the nature of the housing that they're exposed to. So that's how those two things fell together.
And why wasn't this thought of before?
The housing was talked about initially in the first proposal. Then what happened was, because we thought that housing coding would be more rigorous than institutional coding, we said, let's just deal with program space as the first priority. We went through a whole series of conversations, too, about this whole thing of in loco parentis. The college having to act as the parent of the student because it would be in a college-owned kind of thing. And then, so we said, no, we don't want to do that. Then we said that the college should not even lease the apartments for that reason, that we should try and lease them to the students. But we went through that process. It didn't work. So that we ended up back in the same bag that we started with, and at that point the housing thing came back to the inflatable, because if the college was owning the apartments that the students lived in and had that responsibility and students were paying $90 a month, why not then have the same problem exist but where students could pay $35 a month?
I'm interested in the inflatable. I'm interested in it remaining in Columbia. Since we're in Columbia, this will of course be an option open to us, but it will depend on exactly what the inflatable is and what its purposes are and who it will serve, that is, what the clientele is. That will determine, and its cost, and a number of other parameters that are, I guess, rather obvious. That will determine whether or not we're going to move or whether we're going to stay here. I can't be any more definitive than that.
As soon as possible. I think I've said there in previous interviews, first of all, when the prototype gets built, I would like any part of the arts program that seems suitable to what's going on out there moved out there immediately. And that secondly, everybody in the arts program is interested in getting into an inflatable, into the inflatable that was planned at any rate, as soon as possible. That they find it exciting, that it offers possibilities that they're just imagining about, but that the quality of the thing, of the space itself, the kinds of things they see themselves doing in it are very attractive.
Oh, housing is just going to really mess us up. Or we could never get the housing, through the codes. We're having a hard enough time with program. That would mean doing some research about what the codes for housing were. Are they different from that of, program and educational institution? If so, how different? Dealing with those kind of variables, and developing a position. And a position could be, listen, we know there's a housing problem in Columbia. We really don't think that this is the solution for it. We view this as a solution to only one part of the Columbia problem, and that's program facilities. And we want you to know how we feel.
But if we were putting up the bubble for 5-year use, we have to be assured that we can stay there for 5 years. And as I understand it, we will now not be able to get that assurance for the land adjacent to the barn.
The county government is then going to come through and say, okay, now we would approve the larger structure. I think it's at that time that you probably are going to want a longer term lease in any event, and that we would be engaged in trying to find the place where this same use could be performed for an indefinite length of time, rather than a nomadic kind of relationship to land, and that might not be the best place. But I do think that not only is the land actively being marketed, it's virtually been marketed. I mean, we're very close to resolving that area, but I would certainly feel that we ought to be able to find a way, must find a way to allow you to have a responsible period of time in which to take advantage of what you've done.
Tremendous amount of hostility toward the idea of the bubble in both Washington and Baltimore, because they think the thing is a game. They think it's like a middle-class gig. They think that it's another example of a play culture operating.
It's a reasonably useful technological invention, and it's worth trying it out. And what I'm arguing now is that technological inventions aren't exclusively that they have social meaning, and especially our involvement in them has social meaning and purpose. And all I'm suggesting is that we really debate, as we never have honestly, the meaning of this kind of experimentation and the social purpose of it. And what I'm proposing, I guess, and I don't think it's being received very well, and I don't think it's a radical change from my own perception, is that if we have any reason for existence, it's a social purpose. And that the kind of technological thing, which is useful, interesting, provides interesting space, it ought to be put in a value framework, and we ought to debate the value framework.
You think that's a must?
Yeah. I think anything we do ought to be in a value framework. That if we don't, that is, if we talk about even such a mundane thing as tuition, but we don't talk about it in terms of a value framework, then we're just like any other college in the country. Yeah, human value.
I got into this thing on the level of trying to solve an Antioch problem, my interest then have gone further, and it takes a place like Antioch to be able to build the first one of something like this, to make it a very visible kind of demonstration project. And what I think Rick and I have begun to see is that there are a lot of other people that would be affected by something being built, whether it's in Columbia or Baltimore. So that my interest at this point tends to move toward making sure that we don't, in moving to Baltimore or deciding to stay here or deciding to do both, so dilute our energies or the possibility of something being pulled off that we have lost, I think, what we have as a pretty good chance of pulling off something that could create some changes on a larger scale.
Who carried forward an idea to a point of encouraging prospective innovation. And what we now would like to see happen is that it become much more of a community undertaking rather than just an Antioch student undertaking. We would like to really extract from this experience the maximum community opportunity. What could it mean if we were doing this in that spirit, and we had sitting around the room not just Antioch students thinking about it in terms of a classroom, but there are all kind of people who have space need.
Even if there were a fair possibility that it might just prove unfeasible or undesirable, if there's a reasonable hope that it might be, I think part of the function of an innovating institution is to take some risks on these things. As I understand it, the possibilities for a different style of environment for learning are so unusual. You might say the potential gain is so high in that respect, it's not a dollar respect, that it would deserve a substantial risk.
So far, there are a bunch of guys here that have got a whole bunch of thousands of bucks on the line.
I am not debating that at all. What I am debating is we're going to spend that fucking money here, we're going to do it somewhere where
What money?
Wait, there is no, you see.
If we found it had such a cost, and let's say, to make sure that it would go, we had to come up with $30,000, and then we had a chance of persuading others to pitch in. But we could go, even if we had to, by borrowing it all. Then I'd urge us to make the decision to go, and I'd be glad to work on trying to raise some of the other money.
This is one kind of available space. It's the cheapest space available. And we're just not getting it. Not getting it fast.
Why aren't we?
Again, pressure isn't being put on in the right places from the right people. We maybe unfortunately have a system that doesn't second guess the needs of people. They have to be told not only the needs, but how badly things are needed. You know, some bitching about space won't do it, or lack of space. It's going to have to be a firm decision, a strong pressure group saying, not only we need space, but this is the kind of space we want. This is when we want it by. It's now your job to get it for us.
Could I have copies of any still shots you people do?
Yeah, sure.
It'd really be a good thing for them to know what I'm doing here.
Yeah, I think the inflatable would be a good thing because it'll provide a new kind of a context that people are going to have to cope with in a way that they never had to cope, with an environment before. Because the inflatable allows people not to bitch about what isn't, but, to take the opportunity to talk about what could be. I think a lot of people are scared shitless about that.
Yeah. One of the ways that I'm trying to respond to it is by starting this course, these two courses in environmental design, which I hope we'll at least begin to get a core of maybe 20 students that are more tuned in to looking at things in this way, beginning to feel potent in an environment so that they aren't afraid to take down a wall, kick it out when they feel oppressed by it, and so that they can begin to see the environment as something that they have both the ability and the responsibility to shape.
And my own sense about resistance to this kind of structure is that it's part of the conscious teaching on the part of the society, which is, permanence and predictability. And people can't deal with the idea of a temporary society, and they can't deal with the question of themselves as transients. And the whole concept of ownership, I think, which means permanence, is just so reinforced that I just think this concept is alien.
Yeah. Tremendous. Nobody feels that they have a sense of ownership in this place. If people take part in the design and building of a space, then they feel like they have a sense of ownership. If people are going to share a structure, I think everybody in that shares it needs to have that sense. It's when someone doesn't, that's a state of alienation, which is just as real as any other state of alienation. I'd say that the alienation from the physical environment is just as important as alienation in a social context.
America is characterized by middle America, that our students, even though they, define themselves as being hip, are square, and have been taught to be very conforming because that's where security is. And I really wonder, how much energy we can get, about the inflatable, given a consciousness of what the inflatable might mean. Because a lot of our students would like us to have a nice building, and they would like it to look like Yellow Springs, or Johns Hopkins, or the University of Maryland, and they just like it to be a more accepting environment, but they really view that as being outside.
For the whole college to move tomorrow into an inflatable building as we've envisioned it would probably mean that there would be a lot of changes if people went in that way, with a sense of ownership, with a sense of potency about their environment. All of the programs, I think, would feel the impact of it. It would, if people eventually lived inside it, it would change, very basically the kind of ways that they lived. People would...
For good?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think it would. I mean, it's a tendency toward openness. It's a tendency toward breaking down, physical barriers, or barriers between people. It's it encourages people to let their fantasies go and to begin to think about, well, there's no reason that we need to do this. We could. Why not? I think it would encourage people to be creative.
And we were talking about how maybe the colleges of the past have been building brick structures and getting stuck with them. They've got to design programs and curricula that have to fit into those things. So they have to pay for them over 25 or 30 years. So we thought that possibly if a college didn't have all of that, it would be possible for them to design a program around their immediate needs for a couple of years, or even 5 or possibly 10 years. And if they decided to move or to change things, they could very easily, just by taking the structure down, particularly if the structure cost about half or less of what they're now paying in rent every year. They could build a building, which sort of got us around to the second real reason for proposing this thing, and that in this area right now the schoolhouse construction and university and college buildings are costing anywhere from $17 to $25 a square foot, and this one will cost a little over $2 a square foot, which will allow us to spend a lot more money on programs and things where money possibly should be spent, maybe outside of the college, and working with communities and fulfilling some of the things that Antioch says that they're interested in doing in Washington and Baltimore, and get more space while we're at it. They're now spending about $6 a square foot for rent, and we'll be building it for a third of that.
So what do we end up saying? We end up saying that in order for people to act on their own behalf and to realize potential that they don't know they have, that they need opportunities to find that out about themselves, and that the inflatable is one of the most, exciting vehicles to do that because of its flexibility. And maybe one way that we begin to interpret the inflatable to the students is that it provides them with the opportunity of designing their own living, learning kind of environments, which they can change once they find that their needs change.
Areas might be deflated and inflated. Let's say this is inflated and this is deflated, and if we want to join these two like an amoeba, we just inflate the center and then we have a larger space. But that's in the future, although we don't see any reason why this technology won't lend itself to the dream of the building, that expands to encompass its occupants and contracts again. There must be something in nature that does that. The womb, which actually is flexible and can accommodate whatever the going demands on it might be.
Every job that you do is going to be non-standard, whether it be Antioch's requirement is entirely different from Princeton's and Burnham's and so forth. So you're in a constant R&D effort, and no manufacturer's in a position to fund that.
The point I'm trying to make is that they're different, just as Notre Dame is different than some other cathedral. They're all different, but they're all the same. They're built with stones. They're built with mortar. If you can identify the crucial components and the flexibility in each and the problems of overlapping, we've got it down to 6 systems, which may or might not be right. We're very willing to talk as to how well we've done it, but we're trying to deal with it in terms of you've got an environmental control system. It crosses the 5 other systems and it creates certain types of overlaps.
And they're a common system.
Right. So it's not a matter of developing umpteen different bubbles. It's a matter of developing the crucial components and making the one-offs like you'd make the one-offs anytime you do a plumbing job anywhere. But the point is you start out with standard piping. And the plumber's the guy, he makes the infill. It's not up to industry to develop 6 million different joints, for plumbing. It's up to industry to come up with that thing that works and gives the plumber the flexibility to do the one-off job.
There was no objection as far as how they could be right next to one another for that matter. But they're obviously picking up more air if they can be further apart. It was mainly that they just not be there.
Yeah, right. I didn't want them in the center.
Well, what about moving them, actually compromising on your area here and moving them over?
They shouldn't move out of that center.
No, they shouldn't move out.
No. Not just moving them over more towards the side.
Well, they're getting awfully close to the edge of the area.
The only other way that they could come back here would be if they could be a thing that came up like that, right?
Sure.
They could then come back and then channel into that space. It would be a really neat looking shape.
That's a good idea.
But
there would definitely be a nice thing where you get if you've got a ramp coming up, and there'd be that really nice, whenever a ramp intersects with a circle, there'd be a very nice feeling to it. That they could in fact come from there and then intake getting underneath the thing so that the intake is.
And what kind of angle you're talking about, and how far would it have to reach? That's 7 feet there.
This is lightweight stuff. It can support itself.
No, but in terms of just looks, aesthetics, how this is like 7.
Richie's bound to get into TV tonight.
Well, I was wondering. You said it shouldn't be moved back any further because it's getting close.
Well, the intake shouldn't be moved back any further. Where the air comes in.
in
Yeah,
this
I know.
relationship.
Right, but here you have it shown at least, if this is 14 feet, then that's at least 7. So you have it 7 feet back.
This is exaggerating a twitch, but that's more or less what's happening. And if they're standing here inside this space, which is, this is the solid for all intents and purposes, then you, as you look at them, you'll see this arc behind you coming up and over like that. If they move back, how that works, and did that, I think they'd be like
flexible kind of thing?
No,
or it's not.
It's a rigid.
Well, why so expensive? Why can't you just get regular cheap ducting?
It's got to support weight. It's got to support a truck driving over it. It's got to support the people swinging on it.
Trucks driving over it.
But aren't we going to deck that area?
Not in the first
It's
2
the
days
least
of its
expensive
life.
duct we can get.
And it's also just the the appearance. Like I could really see those things being.
Oh yeah. Almost black or something.
with
international.
It's just taking the thing that a
custom job by Phil.
Like in this, this place they don't. The mechanicals there, they painted it, and it's which is kind of crazy. It's closer to giving us even more stuff. We really had a good talk with the guy from Sweden who came to our office 2 days ago.
I have a question.
And we really got into some good stuff with them in terms of possibly even doing the whole demonstration thing of convincing them to get into a turnkey thing of providing the whole deal. So, as far as some kind of a cable net structure or a tent, I don't think we should be as timid as what that was relating and really try to get bigger. That in fact it could be covering that whole area, and it could be taking the the tent could be the commercial area, the eating, vending, whatever that is, and whatever the store is, and really taking advantage of the fact that this is going to become. In that it's a corner.
Judy's granola stand.
Yes. Did anybody cut out that article in the Washington Post?
About granola?
2 weeks ago?
About us?
Yeah.
It just appeared in the Providence Journal 2 days ago.
Really? Also the San Francisco Chronicle.
We haven't been getting any of that stuff.
Yeah,
We don't get
Antioch.
newspapers.
Written by Michael Karen or something.
Kieran.
So it's
His
really getting
wife
around.
works for
It's
him.
really national. It's really incredible.
him a lot.
I'm going to ask him to
Yeah,
cut it
he's a
out.
good guy. I really like. Kind of really timid with a stutter.
But really, it's girly in a good spot.
Yeah,
He
right.
just really comes up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a long talk with Karen about it when we started.
But when people from Sweden come over, it'd be nice to have that article on the wall. Sort of.
There would definitely be some sort of thing of these people either getting to there or out to here, and there's this minor and the minor and major flow thing. But I don't think again that
Would
you
there be
want to
a
have
major 6-foot
kind of
thing?
major kinds of people going through here when it would be nice for these people to be able to use that bank when you've got a path going right there.
Good idea. Okay.
Okay, that the major kind of the street thing again, and what it's doing is it's allowing people to come up here and experience this space from a vantage point that they're still doing something, that they're coming along here, and then if there's something happening in here, they can go into it, or if they just want to walk into the space, fine. Probably one of the more deceiving things is that by drawing along that's going to happen, and so there needs to be some sort of access to get to that. Or if there's, if it's the local rock,
That'll be a dumping place, and it'll serve.
What's that? Oh, Montessori?
video.
No video. Okay.
At one point when Time Life was still supposedly doing the cable system in Columbia, I talked to their managing director, about the possibility of putting an input to the cable system in the bubble, so that we could cable cast from the bubble. And they said, "Wow."
What else did they say? The cable.
And that way people, like the whole, all classes at Antioch could be open to all of Columbia through monitoring.
Number 12, phone and television.
Sesame Street,
There are going to be 60 channels on the cable system, of which about 40 they're not going to know what to do with. So, we can break up, 4 monitors and 4 cameras, and on 4 separate channels broadcast 4 classes.
Fire lane 2, just getting out of there and then dumping into this space and out. And if there's a fire door there, then that's the point of departure. It's not inside. And so that's where the distance thing comes in.
I thought we had an idea of actually having more of a diamond-shaped area. It's really strange.
There was, but I think
it's like it's getting a pentagon.
But that was when they we hadn't really put function stuff into it, and I think that there's a very reasonable logic to the way this function thing is worked out, and putting the flow in this way, which is close to what it was last week, but it's more realistic now. I think to take this and more or less finalize it into the kind of drawing that other flow was, can now take the hardware and put it on top of here.
2-second Plumer vinyl.
What's this stuff? Let's see. Oh, I know. Another thing, when we were getting into the classroom and seminar areas, that if they're going to be 120 people running at some point in the day having classes in there, it's probably not 120 people at any one time. It's 120 during the day, because the other thing that goes into this is how the building is scheduled.
Yes.
And so the different kinds of classroom space that are necessary, that this geodesic can act as being a place for, if you wanted a controlled space for video to happen as an interview kind of thing, then it could happen in a controlled space. That at a later, in another part of the day, would be a classroom space. Keeping track of drawings that are done for this part of the project, and for publicity on it, that there's already publicity around, but it should start to be made sure that there's at least one copy of all the stuff, so that it's in good shape for use when the building opens and all that sort of thing, just for the record of it.
We could run.
Yeah, you can do it. Just pick up some stencils and do them with stencils. There's lettering stencils or something.
Wouldn't hurt to have a place
You could do a series of stand pads on each one of these.
Stuff you do on the yellow paper. You never know when, you may be on the like 2 weeks and you think, let's sketch something like that. If you just had it.
A tracing. That was one of the first wall ideas we had. I think that I'd certainly forgotten about it.
Yeah, I had too.
Something that ought to be revived.
Right.
It's certainly easy and quick. And I was talking about doing fantasizing about a bubble that would be covered with vines, and somebody suggested, I've been thinking of honeysuckle and various and sundry ivy and stuff like that. And somebody said, you should do it with grapevines, because grapevines grow fast. And they also produce fruit. Right. So you just cover the
just walk around on top and collect the juice from the done.
Something like that, but I don't know whether any kind of a halfway decent growth could occur in a season, in a single season.
But if you had in the inside, if you used ivy, it would be green year round.
Well, some of the tropical ivies or the tropical vines would grow like crazy. They would grow inside of 6 months.
Sweet kid.
This is, way out of focus too. Yeah, well, I'm building one in balsa wood now, a small one, and I'm discovering I had trouble drawing it because I didn't know how to put it together, so I'm starting to put it together, and that helped me draw it a little better.
Perfect.
I'm trying to separate this space from this desk from the rest of the space. If you want it to be open.
Where is that?
This is the library.
Library.
This is a corner of the library. And you could turn this back, when you would, if you really didn't want to be private. And this is a typewriter with a mushroom over it. I'm not sure exactly how to do that because I'm not sure which way the sound travels. One way is to you're sitting at a desk, and there's like an upside down salad bowl, except a lot bigger, right over the typewriter. And if the sound is coming up, then it'll trap it. if the sound started going out, then it's not going to do much good.
And they might be just as much of a hassle with anything. But with that as a base, you might start with a coolie hat or something that would give you an enclosure, or the football helmet's fine.
Yeah, this is I just said to myself, like, what can I go like in under 20 minutes on Route 40 find?
Well, we've got Rick Creasy's big Navy flight helmet, down at our house.
Okay, that would probably be
it's got a visor too, so
I was thinking of a visor. I was thinking of a visor just in terms of maybe blocking out things from the front, because the other thing is if you have no noise over your ears, but everybody else's noise is coming in, and the guy on the other end of the line is picking up.
How about you're on the phone and you're talking to the anchor guy, and Bart's over in the corner, and you've got your helmet on, and you want to ask Bart something, and you say it to the guy. You have to have a window.
People touch. You have to have some noise.
No, but you can be getting it, but your neighbor needn't be getting it, or that would be the idea.
We use like a rubber pad.
The noise? What does the noise do?
You have to hear the sound of your typing, or you cannot type. It's just, that's right. Because how do you know? You just don't know, right?
Loud things that sometimes happen that you'd like to block out. Yeah, Paul Shatskin. But it's Paul Shatskin some of the time, not Paul Shatskin all the time.
That's sort of really silly to create a wall and not use anything near him because he's only there 20% of the time. Objectionable. Well, there's another thing that we didn't discuss, is that if to get rid of sound is just put distance between people. So if you have two people who are seriously working, one can stay here, and they can both be on the telephone all day and not even, the other one wouldn't know. Whereas here and here, you're very aware of it all the time.
Nice, very round arc with it.
How available are the crates?
There was a stack of them about this high, and like that. Behind the Giant, and they're totally broken down flat. I assume they're not. I don't even know if they intend on reusing them, but I imagine I've been getting baskets back there for a long time.
Can I let you have any of that stuff? They just throw it away.
And no one, I've never ran into anyone.
That's really
back
nice.
It's amazing how the flat surface is so different than when you have those couple of jogs out.
Just to start thinking about it, to start working. And the way I conceived of things happening tomorrow would be that hopefully people should be here at 9 o'clock. Then from that point, we'll probably start out with some kind of instant brainstorming on what materials we would like to use in the next 2 days. What materials could individuals use to best express some of the ideas they've had in their projects? I think there'll probably be people coming in and out all day.
I just think that
but as far as like really Wednesday and Thursday, all day.
Really possible to expect everybody to since materials, you don't know. I mean, sometimes you may spend all day trying to find a certain amount of material, because shit hasn't come in.
Okay.
So, I think that to say that at a certain time that everybody should come back and start building is weird to say.
What I'll say is if you can't find it, give it up and come back.
Places in the skin. I don't think firelaw-wise, I talked to Charlie for about 2 seconds about it, that the fact that it's a net is not a ceiling. And I don't know.
You have to have something to attach that. So the ring is what would sit on top of the ring.
Therefore, you could conceivably collapse the whole thing and put it up just by putting the center ball up and having, and then securing the support.
Let me say something about structurally about your design. That is, you're right about the teepee kind of thing. but it's like a tripod. It works when they're pretty equally spaced. Now, if you took this and you put the two legs in front pretty close together, like you've got there, you have a lot less stability.
You have to think of this center pole, which I didn't do next month to show you, okay? And these two as the supporting structure, and then this as just, you got to imagine that like most of the weight will be on the, yeah. We didn't want to make it small because he gave us the whole space. But the whole thing is monopolized. Well, also there's other things we were putting in it. Like I was thinking of putting running water in, if possible, since it's going to be so dry. Running water.
Personally, I'd rather see a trickle over rocks than a fountain. But part of my bias is that a fountain is so definitely man-made. That within this whole thing you've built that's so natural, it would be foreign.
Sinking something into the ground and just like really shallow and rocks in the whole thing. And maybe I think you really stretch.
Little water comes through. You could do it really nicely. Tiny little stream just circulating.
Yeah, but it has to be large enough and swift enough to get the sound, which is the reason for the water.
It would be.
I think that's a good idea.
You can always do it in the mobile with a
really
tool. Maybe just get some, corrugated cardboard's about the fastest thing to cut. And just, not worry about the bubble or anything, but get the berms in and get what the landscape is. We'll photograph better.
We won't be going back. We're going to go back to Mrs. Palmer's.
Two, be just thinking of how the hardware starts to relate to that information taken from those 4 drawings. And three, get started on a really fast, it should be like a 6-hour thing, base, out of maybe corrugated cardboard, just so that you can get the levels and how the thing really works at this scale. So you can use all those model pieces and really start playing around and relating things in 3 dimensions. Because the planning we can do in 2 dimensions, but when it starts getting into the actual hardware and how things relate in size, then we really need to get to the model thing again. But this has there are enough changes that this isn't really valid to use as much as it would be, for this particular thing. That's fine for selling, but this is more important just to find out exactly how the thing works and to really see what each one of these berms looks like and what each one of the ramps looks like.
Inflatable trees. Inflatable trees.
Like Venturi's California flower thing. But I think those are the things to get into next week. He's putting together a prototype to send to Vertigo for the drug show thing.
But the design will never be done.
The design.
You should always, to even conceive of the design being done is a wrong concept.
It'll be in stage 1, temporary completion when the place opens, just to have an idea where things happen. But the minute we start moving things into this space, they're going to happen in different places. In terms of how they orient, because you can never get a model to be exactly what it is. It can only come close.
The other side of that is we can't. We also can't use that as an excuse.
I'm still sort of, just to get my thinking straight, I'm still sort of unclear about the fire code, and maybe I should be thinking about this just past my mind in terms of closed structures. And I was just wondering whether anybody knew any more information about it.
We cannot use a closed structure to house more than 2 people. Period.
What'd you say?
We cannot use a closed structure to house more
Does
than 2
closed
people.
mean that it has doors?
That's a roof on.
I mean,
Roof and wall.
if you put a porta-shell in here, you can only use it for 2 people?
Can't use. We can get a porta-shell that will meet the fire resistance code. We can't use a porta-shell unless they can come up with a better form of fiberglass, just like the crane people. And they just haven't addressed themselves with that problem.
It's got a fire extinguisher.
Building ski huts, they haven't really met that problem.
What if it's got fire extinguishers?
Won't do them a better good. In what list and in the crane thing.
What if it's all doors?
It's not the escaping. It's the production of incredibly black, dense smoke. and the fact that it's a major hazard. So and the manufacturers.
Right, and what's that going to do for things like scaffolding?
Scaffolding doesn't burn; it's usually metal.
Right. Okay.
And but those.
Okay, so you're saying it's enclosures that have a combustibility can only be for like 2 people.
No, cannot exist at all.
Okay.
I think that if we you have a porta shell that we're going to use as a demonstration or something of that sort, we'll probably be able to use it, bring it in, demonstrate it, and take it back out again.
Now, is that Howard County?
No, it's the state of Maryland,
No.
the government of the United States.
If you wanted to have one of these
that's weird,
bubbles.
The porta shell that we have in the drugstore, we've got 5 projectors running.
That's right. If you're doing it for the federal government, you're in much better shape than if you're doing it for anybody else. The federal government doesn't use either the building codes or the safety
they go by the
standards.
Bureau of Standards and the national and the NFPA.
They don't go by anybody. They go by what they want to do. And the next step down would be the sovereign states. They operate more or less the same function, but as soon as you get into a private thing, we've got to satisfy everybody. It could be a double-loaded storage bin with a lid on it that would work very nicely.
So if you could roll it out the garage door. Now, what about a thing like a Wanga room that's all the metal and glass? That can be used for more than 2 people, right?
No, not in satisfied code.
Then isn't that in the same category as the scaffolding then?
No, the scaffolding is an open platform.
And what happens if you start putting panels on it?
Put 2 panels on it, they're display panels. If you put 3, you still got a display panel. If you put the 4th and put a door on it, you're in trouble.
But it's strange because California's got about the strictest codes in the country.
You haven't satisfied the NFPA if you've been using the fiberglass. Unless they classified it as furniture, which they could have done.
I think they possibly did because
it's going to be a beautiful reflecting surface so that batteries, lights along the berm shining at that, it would glow. You wouldn't know where the source was.
We do everything we're supposed to do tonight, Paul?
I don't know. These are...
Should we go have some dinner, George?
No.
Go get some supper?
Yeah, even conference room.
There's one thing that, seeing as everybody's together, that we might talk about. There's a charrette one weekend from this one on Glen Echo, which will be a Friday, Saturday, Sunday operation, and everybody's invited, and bring sleeping bags and to sleep in the old Spanish ballroom. And it's to discuss the use of this old amusement park and philosophic retreat place for what its future use as a national park might be. And it's intended to be a craft center where people...
The secretary? No. Why not?
Because she'll wind up spending all her time answering questions about where to go.
Telling people.
It may be that it's us. Maybe it's us. Maybe it's we each take 2-hour shifts or something doing it, Maybe it's us, but they're going to need somebody there. They're going to need someone to explain what's going on. I mean, rather than them walk down and start asking, maybe head tutors or something.
To disturb a class while it's on.
Maybe you should design it so that it explains itself.
Yeah.
Like I can't see someone sitting at a door all the time.
Okay, so immediately.
Well, this is just for the people who need questions. Like, not every question can be explained in writing. I think that people who wander around it don't need explanation. Just wander around. It's just the person who needs a question can come and ask. Conversation seems to have a little text that says "You are here."
Anybody who comes in that door and that door, we're going to castrate if they don't know what they're doing.
No, the flavors of that door is probably lost anyway. Once they got to that door.
Besides that, he's drowned.
The mode is at
Any bloke who comes into this door is in deep trouble. Bloke who walks in through that.
We're going to catapult at the top. Wong, wong.
I was a little carpet that shoots over and picks it up. Takes him across the bubble and dumps it. Yeah, we were thinking about doing something like that for the exhibit center. You know how those little telephone pieces you pick up and you get an audio tape? doing that with videotape, setting up a color television screen, and bits and pieces of the story.
Just a great big wall.
Yeah, people, crazy.
God dang. Should we start? Should we start getting so specific as to think about community health and community?
I didn't think so.
Sure. We should when we get down to the heart.
Eventually, I don't know.
We should say this. We should leave the space very definitely undefinite.
Right.
That might be the first thing you can do.
Let's do what we're doing now. Like
And then figure out what you've got in there.
Put out places where there could be offices, places where there could be classrooms.
And it might be that you have more than one place for reception.
So what? Let's have a whole roll of paper.
Yep. Let's choose
put that where there could be shops, and then fit into specific classes.
Getting the paper ready, because Alan's going to be moving so fast.
What's that?
You going to move fast, Alan?
I'm going to move fast. I'm going to wait for it to put together. You want to lie something down on top?
No, I'm not going to lie to you. I want to do it.
If you want to lie on top of it, Paul, you can. I mean, you're going to sit up. That's all right.
Let's do it.
It's pretty big. Is that, how high is it? How high do you like it?
It doesn't have that on it. You only get a half view, but it could be 3/4 if you like.
What would be those 5/8?
That's 5/8 of 22.
So about 3/4.
Would you like a quick answer?
No,